on. It's one of those later maps that maybe not everyone got a ton of time to practice on. Certainly a stark contrast to Dark Heart Thicket, again, one of those 7-0 rollouts. You know, Ted, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I'm not shocked to see this. We all did have a great opportunity to talk to these teams, and Cathedral is the one they stated that they're best versed in, and they had a lot of practice in the regionals. Not to mention that this time, you know, if the teams do move on to that kind of grand final stage, it is a forced map, if I'm not mistaken, at the end. So it's a map that the teams really have to practice, and they feel comfortable with it, so here we go. But this is also the team that said earlier, Jack, remember we talked to them, that they're very worried if they lose that first map. They put in a lot of investment in that first win. Nonetheless, let's take a look here at Cathedral.
Yeah, you're seeing Luffy on the right side of your screen here, you know, using his invisibility potion, using, of course, the fastest speed set that he has possible to be able to make sure he's blitzing his way through all these mobs and make sure that he's going to be able to skip ahead. That'll be the interesting thing to see as you're seeing SKYLINE.D, for example, having everybody in range. You're able to see everyone there, whereas you know, Luffy is running ahead to make sure they're able to have that larger skip. But what you will be seeing is, of course, you know, Luffy going up to the very top, going up into Agronox's room, make sure that he's going to be able to get into position to be able to res the rest of his team using Mass Resurrection, whether it be right below him, getting the res off, and skipping a ton of trash along the way here. SKYLINE.D here is just working on the last of course, the mini-boss and all the additional trash here, and as you're seeing, OMEGASNIPED taking the nice leap of faith.
And just to mention, of course, we do not have Sanguini Panini Weenie on the map right now. It's actually quaking and bolstering. We do have that bolstering showing up again for the mobs, for the teams, so we're going to have to see exactly how their strategies rely on pulling some of these mobs with the bosses, if they even choose to do that. One of the opportunities being here for Agronox, the first boss, as he does have a lot of flowers in his room, but he is accessible immediately, Jack. As you mentioned, we do see the kind of stealth run that we typically saw in a lot of the regional phases, especially for Europe and NA, running up, doing the res and doing the skip. Now, the risky thing here, Jack, as we've talked about many times, is if they die, the only checkpoint in this dungeon is all the way back at the start, so it's really risky play here from them right now.
Yeah, at this point, you know, it is that all-in move with going onto them, but at this point, you know, especially when we've talked to them in the past, they have to go all in. They have to be able to put everything out into the table here, because we've seen sometimes in the past, especially in the regional stage, some teams that didn't quite make it, didn't quite get back to the, or didn't quite make it out of the group stage, really just played a little too safe, and they really played a little too secure. And when you're not able to see what the other teams are doing, you just have to put everything on the line here.
So unfortunately, we do have a fear go out for SKYLINE.D, as they did pull that Bat Rider trash. You have to make sure you interrupt that. Cost 2 deaths, 3 deaths on the board now, as we saw that cheat death proc earlier, and the Rogue has released. We still have a death over from the DH, who has not opted to release. Epo kind of running for his life here, does go down eventually, and we're going to have that perk proc on the tank, and Reigns will be going down as well. A full team wipe coming out of SKYLINE.D on the side there, just because of that missed interrupt for the fear, so that's going to be devastating for them. Team OMEGASNIPED looking in a really prime position now to clean up the rest of this trash and get ready to pull Agronox.
Yeah, at this point, you know, there's so much extra trash that they're taking care of, and of course, Mayu has to just interrupt his cast due to quaking going out there, so it's a little bit of extra time wasted here, as OMEGASNIPED is going to be getting, you know, their first checkpoint when they have to be dealing with Agronox. You are having Hadrian going into Purgatory again, and it's very important to be able to watch out for this, because Agronox, you know, even though we're not on a tyrannical setting, it still will be no joke in terms of the damage that can be pumped out into them, and even if, you know, we're having a little bit of issues with ad control, a lot of things can kind of compound on each other, so those are really not the areas that you want to see any kind of Purgatory being procced.
Agronox now being pulled, of course, the Corrupted Tree full of Chlorophyll over on the side of Team OMEGASNIPED. Now, you notice how they pull it over to that middle area, that kind of fountain garden area, wanting to make sure that they get the lashers that spawn on the side, which each fixate one player, funneling in and bottlenecking through the boss so that they can stun, CC, and slow them on top of the boss and effectively cleave them down. The Succulent Lasher, of course, that spawns on top of the boss, particularly dangerous to the tank, does a lot of melee damage, and does do that succulent secretion that explodes for damage around the area. Usually you want to stun that, but as long as you move slightly out of its range, it shouldn't be of any harm.
Yeah, at this point, you know, they were rotating through stuns to be able to make sure they're interrupting it when they can, but also just trying to make sure the area denial was as little as possible here. SKYLINE.D is redoing the pull that had previously wiped them, making sure they're getting all the trash down. Evil is going down once again, and this is what we kind of wanted to see, or kind of wanted to look at, is how well melee, well, not specifically, is how well melee is going to be able to respond to so many different, you know, effects that are going to be going on, especially when SKYLINE.D is opting for that triple melee composition.
You know, there's a reason that a lot of teams skip the trash downstairs. It's not just because it's effective and it's kind of clever to use that res upstairs, because it is a 180-degree radius, you know, three-dimensional for a sphere, if you will. But the biggest deal is that a lot of that trash is just so dangerous. It has frontal cleaves on the tank, turns around with that fell strike, just hits a lot of players, and we could see all these spot deaths plus that full wipe coming out of SKYLINE.D. Team OMEGASNIPED downing Agronox now and getting ready to move over. Now, having done this, they have secured the next checkpoint in the dungeon. So should they wipe soon before the death of the next boss, they will not spawn at the beginning of the dungeon, rather over on Agronox.
Yeah, at this point, they're just grabbing some of the trash mobs from the left side of the room, making sure that they're getting everything in together here, as SKYLINE.D is just kind of working on skipping ahead. You were seeing on the side of SKYLINE.D, Reigns pulling a lot of those extra mobs to the side, and the rest of the team just skipping on through here because they did previously use their mass stealth for the side of SKYLINE.D a little bit earlier to be able to skip past some earlier trash mobs. So at that point, that's why you had to see Mayu get everybody rezzed up here. But you are seeing a bunch of deaths coming out on the side of OMEGASNIPED, but again, the checkpoint is just right around the corner.
Yeah, but I mean, sloppy play right there. Zongo has his cheat death go off. We see I'm Fired Up go down. 5 deaths on the board for Team OMEGASNIPED. Of course, 4 of those were on purpose earlier in the dungeon, as the team did kind of get themselves killed to make sure that they get rezzed upstairs by the Holy Paladin. So an extra death there, plus the unavailability, Jack, it's early, of that cheat death for the Rogue. They do move upstairs. Now, a lot of tricky trash here in form of these imps. A lot of casts similar to the imps that we've seen in some of the other maps. You want to make sure you interrupt them, otherwise the tank will get nuked, similar to the ones in the Court of Stars. Plus, you have all these kind of candle holders on the side that you want to make sure you interrupt before they drop their books. And if they do drop their books, you want to make sure you get that stun out, especially on those arcane anomalies.
Yeah, extremely big pull coming out of it here on the side of Hadran. Keep in mind, he does not have Purgatory available to him, and this is going to be in a bolster setting. So having, this really tight situation, everyone dropping very low by stacking on each other with Quaking, but also having very high requirements for being able to have that single target damage onto the priorities, making sure that, Hadron immediately getting out as everything starts bolstering. Really good add damage, really good control on the side of Team OMEGASNIPED here, really preventing a lot of bolsters.
And we see that banish come out of Zyronic just before they started AoE, preventing one of those higher health scavengers from getting too many bolstering stacks, but likely also proccing the Cephas, which I would assume he's wearing at this point, and if not, then it did at least help with that CC. A lot of those books going down. We can see the Arcane Anomaly book on the left side of the screen there, not anymore, but it does disappear as they do cleave it down effectively, getting ready to pull Gazerax, the eyeball, kind of mini boss of the dungeon. Does a lot of damage once you are required to turn around and make sure you avoid his AoE hit, but then he pumps out a ton of damage on the group, Jack.
Yeah, at that point, you're really weighing, depending on the level of the key, whether you're going to be able to have everybody stacked up, whether you're going to try to have everything outranged, because you will be able to move just past 40 yards to be able to, dodge any of the extra damage that you'll be doing. But they are pulling Gazerax in with the rest of these little impacts to be able to pump out a little bit more single target damage here. This is probably where you're going to see CDs coming out for Luffy to make sure he's keeping the entire group topped off here.
And the tank as well, as we see a lot of damage go out on Hadrian. There are a lot of those imp casts getting off. The eyeball boss doing so much damage. We're really going to have to keep an eye on how things unfold here. But this mob, the Gazerax, can be buffed by bolsters, so they have to make sure not to kill the scavengers and the imps who have substantially lower health than Gazerax first. Otherwise, they're going to have a wipe situation on their hands. Of course, haven't forgotten about SKYLINE.D on the left side of the screen as they just wrap up their Bloodlust. 46% now on Agronox. I mean, they got their work cut out for them. They've been set back quite significantly with no huge advantage to trash.
Yeah, we've seen a Holy Avenger going up for Luffy, as you are seeing Zongo going down, Luffy going down. There are so many bolsters that were like really close to happening. I think he only took a couple bolsters to make sure that Zongo and Luffy were going down. It was a little bit of a delay getting Holy Avenger out there, though, to be able to be properly prepared. And not everybody was completely topped off going into it. So I would have kind of liked to see maybe a little bit better preparation or more preemptive to try to preempt some of that damage there. But they are able to mop up the rest of these mobs. You are seeing Thrash Fight coming down here. So it's not too bad of a catch-up that they have to do, but that's a little thing, especially on their counter pick, that you really just hate to see.
Brother Smash Spite, if we did the research correctly, if I remember from previous weeks. Now, we do see those Arcane Anomaly books getting bolstered there by their remaining mobs, but Zyronic doing well to spot fear them, making sure.
Good to do those research for Thrash Bite.
No, it's Thrash Bite. I said he's brother of Smash.
Oh, his brother of Smash Bite, yeah.
Talk about this at home. But we do see Thrash Bite being pulled here. A lot of damage coming into that AoE area. Still residual damage on the group, but if you are caught in that zone, it does a ton of damage and punts you back should you survive that. Main mechanic to this boss really being that he will fixate one of the players and run into a bookcase, spawning 2 extra tomes. We all know Thrash Bite hates reading, so to prevent this, you can actually immune. In this case, you do have the bop advantage coming out of the Holy Paladin, as we see that go up on Zyronic right now. Eats it in the middle, no bookcase is destroyed, and of course no books have spawned as a result. And based on their damage, that's probably going to be the only charge they get this fight.
Yeah, at this point they're able to so rapidly neutralize Thrash Bite here. Also saving the books, saving knowledge, which we all want to be able to cherish here. As SKYLINE.D is just now starting to deal with Thrash Bite's room, and they're going much smaller, of course, than their opponents here. So I think this is really a big point here. Is OMEGASNIPED, this is their counter pick. They want to be making more, be playing more cleanly. But when they're going to be at the disadvantage, if they're going going to be able to win this. They want to make sure that they're at least able to kind of calm their nerves down. They're able to kind of get into the flow that they need to, because once they start getting rolling, as we've seen in the NA regionals, they're just able to tear through teams.
So this is going to be an interesting pull here, because oftentimes teams filter about the 80% of the mobs that run out and go to the portal. They filter them together, CC them, and place down a ring of peace to prevent them. But they have to be really careful here with that bolstering. If they mismanage the damage on this mass amount of mobs, they're going to end up with some massive imps on their hand that could easily wipe the group. The only 5 group that will not despawn is the left side of the screen there, the 3 Hellblaze imps plus the scavengers. Those you actually have to fight. Everything else in this room tries to run up the stairs like a coward and disappear into the Cathedral of Night.
Yeah, at this point, they're just getting themselves well set up here. They are having, of course, that banish going out to be able to proc the Sephuz here, getting everything tightly grouped in together. You know, they're having very strong positioning. I like the positioning as Ironic here, making sure he's at the top of the stairs. He was getting there very quickly with his lock gate, making sure that they're able to get everything all in together as the group is going to be following up with them, making sure they're getting that stun there just to be able to neutralize them as rapidly as possible, and they're pulling this off phenomenally.
Yeah, that was great. So he did actually have leg sweep instead of the Ring of Peace, so he got that stun in that 5-second stun right away, finishing them off. Really bolstered mobs there, so a couple of them do leak through the portal, unfortunately. Now, I'm not sure if Team OMEGASNIPED planned for a few of them to leak by accident. We do see that pre-banished mob coming out now as they cleave it, or they DPS it down, getting ready to move upstairs to the spider area. You know, they're going to have to account for that, because we have talked to them in the past and some other teams who have missed a couple of % on this map, and their excuse was always a couple of those imps leaked through the portal. So about 4 of them leaked there, so we're going to have to see if they pull extra or if they had this planned all along. Only 10% left on the board for them. They should easily be able to make up the rest of the trash between this room and, of course, the 4 bats that spawn after Dominatrax, the 3rd boss.
Yeah, at this point, they're making sure they're getting the sap out onto the Enforcer there, skipping around, and then you probably see the sap might switch gears into that Orb Caster. If they don't want to have to worry about it there it is. It goes out right there. They are going to be able to get about 4.5 or 5% from some of the bats at the top after they kill the 3rd boss here. So this should be able to wrap up just enough of their trash. So it looks like it was good planning on their part, knowing that some mobs, especially in a bolstered situation, would kind of get through and escape to the portal here. So it looks like it's going to be very good trash percentage here out of OMEGASNIPED.
Nalasha getting pulled to the side. Now all the players are grouped up on top of her for 2 reasons. One is you don't want her to blink to one of the players that's too far away and then start doing her frontal, as you do get slowed once she blinks, making it very difficult to get out of the way of the frontal. So doing well here to group up, but the other advantage, of course, being the patrol that eventually will lose its sap CC. If they fail to re-CC it, it will pat quite close to where they are. No problem for them here, and Hadrian does manage to kind of get away from these spiderlings that do a ton of damage, especially with that poison dot that they stack up. Luffy, of course, having that relief every 8 seconds with the Dispel for the poison, but nonetheless, they will do a ton of damage. As we can see, Hadrian already copying a more defensive playstyle here, kiting the spiders around in circles as they start to get bolstered, and will soon head up the stairs as they reach that lower health.
Yeah, he really doesn't want to have to use extra cooldowns. He really doesn't want to use, for example, any of his Purgatory here, because you will be having to deal with the next boss, which would be very dangerous. A lot of big threats there, and you are actually seeing the Dispel coming out of Fired Up here, making sure he's able to get the poison spell out onto Hadrian. It's such a nice little bit of extra utility that can come out for the rest of the team to make sure that can happen as Luffy was upstairs, starting some of the RP event to be able to spawn that first boss, as SKYLINE.D is just now getting halfway through Thrashbite.
Yeah, I mean, SKYLINE.D is, since their hiccup, they've performed very well, but it just set them back so far, especially for Team OMEGASNIPED. This is their map. This is their pick. This is their favorite map, the one that they come out strong with, the one that when we talked to them, this they said is their strongest map, and they're showing why that's the case as they move upstairs and get ready for Dominatrax, the 3rd boss of the dungeon, which is available to them as we speak. Now, about this boss, at 90 and 50%, he will spawn 2 portals, one of them, the first set of 2 being near the entrance of the room, which will continue to pour imps out, and if the Portal Guardian, the little fire elemental that you'll see, is not killed by the time he finishes that approaching Doom cast, it will spawn a larger kind of Felguard elemental that does a ton of damage to the group. So you want to make sure to control these mobs. And the imps, of course, nothing to scoff at. They do a ton of damage. That cast hits for about 4 or 5 mil, and the tank needs to grab it too. Melee is quite hard as well, but we do see that Vanish come out from Zyronic as one of the imps is controlled on the side, and the first 2 Portal Guardians are well dealt with.
Yeah, and you're seeing Luffy actually helping out Zyronic onto that second portal ad, making sure that they're going to be able to just get those down together and that the rest of the melee doesn't actually have to move around in the process here. We are seeing as they went into the Aegis of Agrimar here, you're dealing a little bit less damage to everybody. You're also dealing less healing. So at that point, it's okay even if you have Quaking going out. You're actually not going to be hurting yourselves that much at all here. And they're just now getting to the 50% mark right after the Chaotic Energy went out. So they're quickly able to get onto the next portal portal side without having to worry about any of the casts going out from the boss.
These mistresses come up right now from the side. Now, the danger about them, especially right now during the chaotic energy, is that these mistresses will do an AoE shadow cleave that will punt players out of the area. So you want to make sure not to stack them at the shield in the middle of the room, as they do have the potential to kind of hit the players out of that safe area right before that chaotic energy go out, and that would lead to a rather chaotic situation if I do say so. But they are dealt with. The Portal Guardians are down. Only 2 mistresses left. They cleave them down effectively, and Dominatrax will be entering his soft enrage phase in just a moment, where he will increase his attack speed and damage on the tank slightly. Already hitting pretty hard, as you can see Hadrian getting some chunked health there, but should be no problem for them to finish this boss off. SKYLINE.D doing their pulls right now as they've downed Thrashbite and are working their way up to the 3rd boss.
Yeah, at this point, they're just playing a lot more safely here. They're getting, their mistress down, but they've kept it up for such a long time to allow Zongo to get that Shuriken Storm in, get the extra combo points out, funnel in more single target damage here. But it's phenomenal control out of the group to make sure that they're not impeding each other's damage, not actually, hurting each other's AoE, or sorry, single target damage by, spamming a little bit of extra AoE on the side here, and they've just set up such a phenomenal advantage for themselves here.
So the 4 bats, the Dreadwings, do come down from the windows. Now the final percentage that Team OMEGASNIPED needs prior to Mephistroth spawning the final boss of the dungeon. Not the most dangerous boss in the world. They will have to deal with 1 phase 2 rotation at their DPS level in this 23. But as long as the tank keeps that shield going well, and we'll talk about that in a second, should be of no concern to them. Of course, they will not have that Bloodlust available. As we see, they have 4 minutes and 30 seconds on that cooldown for them. SKYLINE.D now dealing with Nalasha, getting ready to move it up to Dominatrax. 1 minute left on their Bloodlust, rather, not Battle Res.
I love seeing the positioning out of Hadrian as he was kiting those bats away. He was actually dipping in and out of melee range to be able to get some extra damage out onto them, then running out before the Shadow Strike went out. So it creates a nice consistency for the rest of the DPS, where they're not just immediately having to run a whole great distance and then catch up and then stop or anything like that. So really great control as they're going on in Mephistroth here. But you are seeing right off the pole, one of the Spires is getting spawned into melee. You really want to see Luffy standing a little bit further out to be able to kind of bait those away.
The problem is he does want to take advantage of his damage and, of course, his mastery, increasing the healing on that melee, so that's why you see him piling in there. But, of course, the cost of that will be the Spire spawn in the melee area, as it will target 2 non-tank units, usually preferring ranged, but, of course, we do know Holy Paladins are considered a melee unit. We do see Fang go down on the left side, and Purg proc over for the Blood DK for SKYLINE.D. Looking a bit of a sloppy pull, something that we saw Hadrian be so defensive about with the remaining Spiders after Nalasha, has cost SKYLINE.D just a bit of health there, and they're only at 81% trash, so that's going to be really interesting for them. They're going to have to kill the 3rd, 4th boss and hightail it back through the dungeon. It's phase 2 here for Team OMEGASNIPED, as the tank Hadrian there protects Illidan, the blind, obviously, from the middle area, from those purple balls from the side, from the images. If any of them hit, it will extend the phase jack with that increasing damage.
I'm seeing better saves here than the World Cup right now, as Hadrian's doing an excellent job holding onto the shield here, defending Illidan and making sure they're able to get through this phase so rapidly here. Great plays.
One of those balls does hit Hadrian, but we are out of this phase as the remaining images despawn, and Mephistroth himself reveals himself as the teams get prepared to go through phase 1 again. Now this phase 1, the first one that you encounter in the fight, he's at about 60 energy already, so the last 40 seconds, usually perfect for Bloodlust, of course, which is not available to them. This one he starts at 0 energy, so they should be very comfortably able to kill the remaining percentage on Mephistroth and tie this series up in just a moment, as he will not enter another second phase. They just need to keep a good head about them.
Yeah, at this point, they've done such an excellent job to be able to make sure they have that strong positioning. And last time that we actually saw OMEGASNIPED in Cathedral was when they actually had fired up onto the mage here. So it really goes to show, as they're adapting their compositions, as they're looking at how they can edit their strategies from the regionals to this point. The extra confidence being able to bring in, the double melee here. It's worked so well for them going into the series, and this has got to be the big confidence booster for them.
I mean, that's just it. And we've said this 100 times already, so let's make it 101. This is the map that they said is their biggest strength, the one that they feel best trained with. But my biggest concern, really, I mean, a lot of the teams we talked to said, obviously main strategies, if we've kind of seen this theme of this MDIB, is that we can hear some clapping in the background right now. That is not Jack, just so you know at home. That is actually Team OMEGASNIPED. But the biggest concern I have that we're going to talk about